Canada. Whereabouts are you located?
I'm in southern Arizona.
Oh, so you have way different weather than us over here.
Yeah, we don't have really cold here.
We have -11, and I just came from it's not pretty over here. -11, and I came from like 4-degree weather, and I believe we even use different units than you guys. So yeah.
Well, so you're a Canadian, huh?
Canadian. Yeah, I don't know my Fahrenheit very well.
Okay.
But yeah. So before we get started here, if you'd like to let people know where people can find you, I think it's always great for the conversation so that people can do their research if they don't watch the whole thing.
Want me to do that now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, I would invite all of you viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, septemics.com, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even an audio called Introduction to Septemics that you can listen to that explains it in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I'm thankful for that too. I just did a listen on it, and I tried to understand. We're obviously going to learn some more from you here. I feel a little intimidated with how large the subject is.
It is a large subject.
And I was going to ask you how you ran into this, because it seems so fundamental and so large. I don't mean to have this high level conversation where people are wondering what we're talking about, but how did you run into this?
Okay, so I just want to comment on your comment, which is that I come from a hard science background. Septemics is very much like Newton's 3 laws of motion. Once you see what it is, it's like, well, duh. It's just that nobody's figured it out before I do.
Mm-hmm.
You could even say the same thing about E equals MC squared. You know, once you know what it is, it seems pretty sensible. Mm-hmm. But before it was figured out, nobody had a clue. Now, here's how I got it. The story really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, at the time, I thought I was going to be engineering physical things, such as airfoils, motors, gears, electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was obvious to me I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because that is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest difficulty, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people. Don't understand the spouse, don't understand the child, don't understand the parent, don't understand the boss, et cetera, et cetera. This is what most of what goes on, like all that rioting that went on in Minneapolis, that's just because those two groups of people didn't understand one another. If they understood one another, they might not agree, but there wouldn't be riots. So this book solves that problem across 35 axes, meaning there are 35 different septemic scales. And so when you bring it to bear on a problem, you have 35 slices of it. In other words, if one scale doesn't get it, another scale will. So to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer where I worked one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description, helping them attain higher states of responsibility, equanimity, capability, awareness, mental clarity, etc., depending on what the person wanted.
Human development engineer?
Yes.
Is that a social science?
Well, I guess you could call it that. It's engineering. Yeah. I'm an engineer. It's just that I adapted my engineering to human phenomena, to human potential.
I ask because it sounds like there's a lot of overlapping between hard sciences, if that's what you call it, and social sciences here. So I was trying to understand which one you're leaning towards, or if it's a mix.
Well, you could call Septemics a social science. As far as what I was doing as human development engineer, it's closer to just say it's human development engineering. That's why it's called that.
Mm-hmm.
So I used engineering tactics, engineering strategies, engineering principles, engineering devices, engineering theories, engineering procedures, et cetera, to help my clients to achieve personal states that they wanted or that were better than what they had.
Mm-hmm. What kind of clients?
You name it. You name it. All kinds of age, all kinds of genders, all kinds of professions, you name it. The only thing you all had in common is they spoke English.
Yeah.
Was not necessarily the first language. You know, I had people who came to me from Europe where their first language was something else, but they spoke English, you know. So that's the only thing they all had in common.
Mm-hmm.
And they had something in their life they wanted to change or improve. So,
had you written the book before you worked with these individuals, or was this work that you've done, that you've written after working with them?
Well, the book was really a result of the work that I did with my clients. Mm-hmm. Let me finish answering your question, and then I think you'll understand.
Mm-hmm.
All my clients improved, and incidentally, I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told that to anyone, but I made notes continuously. And as the years went by, it became obvious to me that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. There's no theory of septemics. This is all based on direct empirical observation. Septemics is natural law, the same way the periodic table is. So, by 1995, I had about 32 scales that varied in length between 3 and 7 that I knew were correct because I observed them. So here's what would happen. I would observe this in a session, and you have to realize the clients had no idea whatsoever what I was doing, how I was doing it, what I was thinking. You know, I was using biofeedback. They didn't see the biofeedback. They didn't know anything about biofeedback. The way they experienced is they came to me with something like, you know, Jim, I can't get along with women. Can you help me? Yes. And after 20 minutes, the guy says, oh, now I see why I can't get along with women. And he does much better. And that's pretty much what went on for 40 years. Now, also by 1995, I was pondering a difficult client. And I had a 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct from decades of usage. I could not find this client on this scale. It's the first time that ever happened to me. Then I realized, wait a minute, this scale has another level. It's a 7-level scale. As soon as I saw what that was, I understood the client perfectly, retroactively and going forward. But more importantly, I knew exactly where to insert it into the 6-level scale. And when I inserted it at that moment, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. Or to put it another way, all of these mathematical data jumped out at me. Now, if you know mathematics well, you understand that's the whole point of mathematics. You start with a formula or an equation, and you coax data out of it, and you get down to something you can use. That is how Einstein found E equals mc squared. Exactly like that. Everybody in the math and physics community knows exactly what he did. So, when I saw this data jump out, having taken 26 semesters of math and having loved every minute of it, I saw this was mathematical. I said, whoa, there are all of these mathematical interactions and interlocking factors that support one another in this table. And again, that's what math is about. That's if you really know math, everything supports everything. There's no contradiction in math. So I said, whoa, I think I found something. Whatever the hell this is, it has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it. I realized I wasn't looking for anything. I was just hoping my clients are making notes. And then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have might also be 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. So I then studied all of these other scales, knowing what I was looking for. And in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales, each one about a different aspect of human phenomena. And they all have mathematics embedded in it. Having gone to school for 28 years, I never saw anything like this. And I thought to myself, I think I found a new subject here. And my next thought was, I could go from helping by the hundreds, which is what I have been doing with my clients as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can have it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft of the book was finished in December of 95, and I immediately sent it out to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And to make a long story short, they all loved it. They had differing responses, but distinctly positive responses. And that told me this is exactly what I think it is, which is a new subject that people will get. People get this. Now, that was 30 years ago, and I've been watching people get this for 30 years. This is not obscure. So some guy is in a bookstore, and he sees a book on a shelf that says Septemics. He says, what the hell is this? Takes it down. He opens it up. Doesn't matter what chapter he opens it up to. He's going to look at it, and he's going to say something like, oh, this makes sense. Because if you would have to be mentally retarded to not see how sensible this is. Because it's natural law, and anything that's natural law is very intuitive. It's like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence. It's the same thing. I just figured it out. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to work on this book. I then worked on the book for the next 25 years. Because first I had to find the phenomena, the septemic phenomena, and I pretty much explained already how I did. Although you have to realize, as soon as I would leave the session and go out in the real world to Walmart or the bank or whatever, I would see exactly the same phenomena in people that didn't even know me. I would watch two women talking, and I would say, oh, yeah, she's at this level. Well, they didn't know anything about this, but they were manifesting it. So every time I viewed this, either in the session or even out of a session with people who didn't know me, it verified my hypothesis, because there could not possibly be any placebo effect or power of suggestion. Nobody had any idea what this was, where it came from, what I was thinking, how I got it, or anything. I just found it and wrote it down. I was like a guy walking along an empty road and found a $100 bill and picked it up and put it in my pocket. So after I had the phenomena, the septemic phenomena, I then had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system, because simply having the scales is not enough. I had the scales, but it took 20 years to craft this into a foolproof system. Let me talk about that for a minute, because this is engineering. In the world of engineering, you are never allowed to say, whoops. You can't have the plane fall out of the sky and say, well, I didn't get that one right. Or the bridge fall into the river. Oh, well, sorry. Not allowed in engineering, okay? Right from the beginning, we have factors of error. We have all of these ways of cross-referencing things and putting in adjustments to guarantee that it will work. That is what engineering is about. And just to be clear, to a scientist, the product, if he's successful, is a theory, like the theory of evolution or the theory of relativity. But to an engineer, The final product is a thing that works, whether it's a cell phone or an airplane or an air conditioner. So that's what I had to do. I had to construct a thing that would work for every person all the time. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching people get this for 30 years. They get it. There has never been a time in all these years, and believe me, I was very attentive to this, that anyone ever said anything like, I don't get this, or this doesn't make any sense.
So explain, so if I'm understanding correctly, there's 7 scales. That is the highest.
It's 35 scales.
35 scales. And what's the 7 part?
Well, each of the scales has 7 levels.
Okay. So that's exactly what I'm getting to. What's the structure? So 35 scales and 7 levels.
Right.
Okay. Perfect. Can you explain that a little bit, the dynamics of how that works? I'm quite curious.
Good. So Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. This is of great benefit to people because in order to use this, you're only selecting from a menu of 7, which is not hard to do. You know, sometimes you go into a restaurant, there's like 200 things on the menu. You could be there for hours, you know. Not like that. So this is very easy to use because there's only 7 possibilities. I have done the heavy lifting of determining what those 7 levels are with precision in the right order.
Mm-hmm.
So the most time-consuming aspect of this was expressing it in a way that would make sense to the average reader. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching people get this for 30 years. You don't have to be a college graduate to get this. I went to great difficulty, great extremes to make this comprehensible to the average reader of English. Like anybody who lives in an English-speaking country and has graduated high school, he can read this. And you have to realize how different that is from what normally goes on in the STEM subjects. For example, when Einstein revealed his theories of relativity in 1905 and 1915, he wrote a paper for other physicists and mathematicians. He made no attempt to explain this to the general public.
Yeah, a framework, if you call it, right? A framework that helps people understand a very complex
So my
underpinning.
My intent from the beginning was to help the people of Earth by giving them this material. And it works because it's natural law.
Just before I get into like digging into the scales, and then obviously the 35. Sorry, what was that again? It takes me a little bit I'm a little stupid sometimes. So
35 scales.
Yeah, 35 scales and then 7 levels.
Of each.
Is that okay? Perfect.
Yes.
And just before, I guess if you could explain the levels, I mean that's really what I'm. Yeah.
Okay. So septem in Latin means 7. The word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. This is all about 7. That's what makes this work. So let me give you a way to understand this right away, how useful this is. So there's a scale of motivation. I have determined the 7 basic human motivations. Now, you could say there are thousands of possible motivations. Yes, but they're subsets of these. They just fit into these headings. You know, so you could take level 1 and you could take like 25 different synonyms and they would all fit into that, you see? So each of these scales has 7 levels and in the correct order, which means there's a top and a bottom. That helps you. So what this does is you take any area, if you find that scale is relevant to a situation, when you study the scale, you'll see the top of the scale, the bottom of the scale, and you have to realize that every human is at some level on every scale. There are no exceptions. The question is not, is the scale relevant to you? The question is, where are you on the scale? Now, let me tell you in a general way how this is beneficial to people. Each of these scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or the beneficialness of any group individual activity. If the group individual activity moves persons up the scale, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I am giving you a yardstick by which to measure human phenomena, which is an entirely new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next thing is, more importantly, once you find out the correct level of any person on any scale, it could be yourself, your spouse, your next door neighbor, when you spot the correct level, you have an insight, or you might call it a realization. Sort of like, oh, now I understand why my wife does that. She's at this level on this scale. Because I have to tell you, this material is extremely precise.
So there's for all these scales, then each one has the same defined levels, or are these steps that are followed from start to finish, or are they marking where somebody's at, like a personality type of thing? I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm just saying as an example, somebody would land on a certain part on these scales at certain levels. I'm just trying to get an understanding of if this is allowing you to see somebody's movement on levels, or if it's really an indication of who they are and who they will remain, or at least who they are right now.
It tells you who they are. It does not tell you who they will remain, because people can move on the scales.
Mm-hmm.
See, what I was doing...
Just quick on this, is the direction always from start to finish on them? Is that what you're finding, or can they go anywhere on that level?
You pick up the person at the level he's at, and you move him up the scale.
Okay.
That is the betterment activity. Now,
so moving up is the betterment, and then at the bottom it's not good. Is
right.
That...
So people go up and down these scales all the time, and once you know what they are, it's not hard to see. I'll give you an example. The scale of basic purposes. The most important thing to know about anybody is, what is this person's basic purpose? That is what the person is trying to do all the time. Most humans, and I'm thinking more than 90%, spend an entire lifetime at one level of the scale. This is what I call a persistent trait. You can move up or down the scale, but it is not easy. It's a big deal. So if a person does some fantastic transformational experience by meditation or facilitation or anything else like that, and he comes to a new place in his life, he moves up that scale, and he has a new basic purpose. The opposite also happens. Let's say you have somebody who's in a Nazi death camp, but he survives. When he comes out of that camp, he's probably going to be a level lower than he was when he went in, because it knocked him down a scale.
Yeah, it's but I understand that now. Is the basic purposes scale, are the levels of the basic purpose scale the same as the motivation one? Or do they have the same wording definition, or are they general concepts of each level?
Every scale is unique. You cannot learn anything about scale A by studying scale B.
And the 7 levels are present in all of them? That's
right.
I was just wondering if they have the same defined wording for not obviously what you're going to see, but is there is it just that the number 7 is present in all of them, or
yes.
is there stages defined, is what I'm asking, between all of them?
So here's the way it works. Let's say you have a mother-in-law who drives you nuts, right? She's always going, right? You have to put up with it. She's your mother-in-law, right? This is a common problem. You can figure out where she is on some of these scales. She is at some level on all 35 scales. And if you know her well enough, which you probably do because she's been driving you nuts for 5 years, you study this, goes, oh, there she is. That explains it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know that, it's like figuring out what species this creature is. You know, like cats and dogs. Cats and dogs are different. I don't know if you know that, but cats, a lot of people like cats, a lot of people like dogs. I like both. Some people have both. But if you don't know that cats and dogs are different, you're going to have a lot of trouble. You can't treat a dog like a cat or treat a cat like a dog. That will not work. You can't put a collar and a leash on a cat and say, let's go for a walk or go fetch the newspaper. Cats are not like that. This is the same thing. When you spot somebody on a level, you know about that person. You have a deep insight into that person's personality. And then your understanding of the person just improved, which means you know what to do with this person. Let me give you an analogy that will help you to understand this. I've been into gardening since I was a small boy. So you might say, oh, you're into gardening. Why don't you come over and see my garden? Okay. So I show up at Kevin's house and I go in the backyard and I walk in there and I say, oh, Kevin has irises, tulips, hydrangeas, forget-me-nots, roses, begonias. See, I can analyze it because I know a lot about flowers.
Clearly. I don't know any of those, but yeah, we can continue with the example.
Yeah, if you wanted, if you asked me, I could say, well, you know, this needs more shade. This needs less shade. This needs more water. This needs less water. Or, you know, if you want to have a nice scent in your house, cut some of these. Don't cut these. You know, like roses have a beautiful scent.
Because you know the relative good and bad of each, right?
Right. Geraniums are beautiful, but they don't have a nice scent. Don't bring them in your house if you're looking for a nice scent, like roses. You bring roses in your house, your whole house is going to smell nice. So if you bring some 5-year-old kid into that garden on the same day that I was there, he is going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled. But all he can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice.
That's a great example for helping me understand that we want to choose the relevant scales at the start. Yeah, there. I understand it now, and I still don't understand the levels perfectly, but that really helps. Yeah, that really helps. Yeah, please.
Because it will help you. So all the kid says, these are pretty and they smell nice, right? That's all you're going to expect from a 5-year-old kid. Now, most adults, and believe me, I've been working on this most of my life, are just like that little kid about people. They don't know what they're looking at, which is why in the United States, more than 50% of all the people who get married get divorced. Clearly, they did not understand what they were looking at, because if they did, they either wouldn't have gotten married or they would have lived happily ever after.
Would have been able to fix it.
This is true also like in elections. You know, if you look all over the world going back for hundreds and thousands of years, you'll see that people routinely elect criminals or morons to run their governments. It happens all the time. Why does that happen? They don't understand them.
Or even just looking at the contention on certain topics and how long they remain in discussion, it shows just back and forth and a lack of ability to get discussion through and a completion on a point. I mean, that's what I notice.
But the big point is, if you know what level a person is at, you can predict what he will do. And I'll give you an example. Apparently, many people are surprised by some of the things that Donald Trump does and says. I'm never surprised by anything he does or says. I understand him perfectly. I realize I'm from New York. I've known about Donald Trump for 50 years. So I know where he is on certain scales. I know what he's going to say before he says it. And very often he's speaking, and I say, the next word is going to be brrp, and that's what it is.
It's valuable.
I can predict what he's going to do and what he's going to say. Now, I have to tell you, because I use all of these skills, my life is full of predictables. In other words, I'm almost never surprised by anything where people are involved. I know what people are going to do, and that's what they do. I don't tell them, but I know the material. Just like I know if I want to cut roses, I got to wear strong gloves, because they have thorns that will slice you up. If I want to cut tulips, I don't need gloves. See, it's knowing the species. So
that's a perfect example. Ties perfectly into why you would need the levels. I mean, the progression part is really important. It provides a lot of stability on top of knowing somebody. You could know somebody, but you don't know where to go with that information. So it sounds like that's the next part.
That's right. And I can give you all kinds of explanations and examples.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay, good. So I gave you the story of the little kid in the garden. He says, these are pretty and they smell nice, right? Okay, so let's change the context. Friday night comes around, right? A guy gets all dressed up in a nice suit. He goes out to a nice bar to meet a young lady, right? Happens all the time, right? So he sees this young lady, he buys her a drink, and they're having a pleasant conversation. Oh, what part of town do you live in? Oh, you drive a Cadillac? That's nice, yeah, right? Now, at some point, this guy thinks to himself, boy, she's pretty and she smells nice. That's the same thing the little kid just said in your garden.
Literally.
Yes. Now, that's enough for him to get her phone number. This poor guy has no idea what he's getting himself into. Maybe she's his dream girl, but he doesn't know that yet. If he had some of this material, he would be able to spot around some of these scales for better or worse. He might say, oh, on the scale of choice, she's on a very high level or a very low level, see? Or he might say, oh, on the scale of literacy, she's at a very high level or at a low level. This is not hard to do. People tell you their levels. If you just shut up and listen, people will tell you their levels. And I'll give you an example. When Obama ran for president, I had no idea who he was. Now, the people in Illinois knew who he was because they sent him to the Senate. But the rest of us in 49 states, 95% of us had no clue who this guy was.
Yeah.
Who's this guy with this funny name running for president? Right? So I thought, well, I better find out because he's running for president. Right? I conducted a septemic analysis of him. Took several weeks. And I was able to determine his level on the scale of basic purposes. Well, I understand what he's trying to do all the time, whether he succeeds or not. That informed me whether I wanted to vote for him or not. And I'm not going to tell you what I found because I never give the level of any living person on any scale. It's counterproductive and unethical. I remember I told you, when you spot the correct level, you have an insight. Right? So a guy, he decides, oh, I'm going to see where my wife is on these scales, right? He says, oh, she's at level 3 on the scale of basic purposes. And that explains X, Y, Z. And that explains when I say A, she says B. When I say C, she says D. Because he understands her. See, this is a big thing, spotting somebody's level on this scale, because it's not going to change, probably. Now,
it's relative to you as well, so it's a beautiful way to have an actionable area on a problem.
Right. Your relationship with her just got better because you understand her, just like the cats and the dogs, I understand cats. And so I get along very well with cats. They like me and I like them. They're very different from dogs, and they're both very different from horses. I get along great with all of them because I understand them. There's a certain way you have to treat a horse or a dog. And if you get it mixed up, you're in a lot of trouble. It's not going to work. So I gave you the suggestion about the guy who goes to the bar and he meets this young lady, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he had some of this material, he could spot her on some of these scales, either as high or low. I do this all the time. This is not hard to do. If you shut up and listen, people will tell you their levels.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, for example, the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the prior presidents who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. This is not a speculation. This is like telling you the difference between a rose and a tulip. If I tell you this is a rose and this is a tulip, that's not an opinion. It's factually a rose and it's factually a tulip. Now, even if you talk to somebody who doesn't know those words, you can see that they're different. Now, it's also true that every tulip in the world is unique, but I can always tell a tulip when I see one. So when you're
Am I correct to say, though, that let's say I, Kevin Nordio, read your book, do the scale on everybody in the world, fictitious, let's say that I did that, you would still have to do your own because it's kind of relative to you, right? On how you're judging it? Or
Look,
are there assessment criteria that remove that bias?
a person is either at that level or he's not. So like what level you are at on some scale has nothing to do with what level another person is at on that scale. So, so I gave you the example of the guy who meets the young lady, and he gets her number, and who knows what's going to happen between them. Now, I'll tell you a true story. I'm a single guy. A year ago, I met a gorgeous blonde. We were both very interested in one another. And so now we're going through the usual getting to know you routine. You know, what kind of movies do you like? What kind of a car do you drive? What kind of restaurants do you go to? Blah, blah, blah. We had at least a half a dozen conversations of that nature. And we were getting along fine. So we're having this conversation and I notice, oh, she's low on this scale. Okay, I didn't say anything. And we had another conversation and I had a similar insight. Oh, she's low on this other scale. And we had another conversation and I realized, oh, she's low on this other scale. Now I'm thinking, wait a minute. I barely know this woman and have already determined that she's at or near the bottom of 3 scales. What that means is she's going to probably be at or near the bottom of 10 or 12 or 15 scales. You see, as I get to know her, as I assess these other scales. So I could see right then this was not something I was going to get involved in. Now, I realized we had no argument, we had no disagreement, we had no harsh words. Everything was very congenial and pleasant. So the next time I saw her, I said, you know, you're a very nice lady, but pass. No thanks. She was shocked.
Yeah. Do you find you have to do a full assessment on every one of these scales?
No. I'll give you an example. Adolf Hitler was at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes. Okay? His goal was to destroy.
So this is a great time. Why don't we focus on that scale specifically? And if you could give just a better understanding of that one scale, I think that's going to help people understand scales and the impact that they can have. Okay,
so I'll go over the scale of basic purpose. So level 7, which is at the bottom.
And we could use Adolf Hitler if you'd like. I mean, it's a good...
Well, he's at level 7. Now,
that doesn't make sense. Basic purposes in Adolf Hitler, I can't understand what that is. So that's actually a good example.
His basic purpose was to destroy. Okay? I call that type of person a subversive. Now, I have to tell you, I'm a serious student of military science. And of course, I studied World War II at great length. When you study World War II, you study Adolf Hitler because he was the commander-in-chief of the Germans. So realize military science has been around for thousands of years. There are thousands of things that we know you should do or not do, that every person learns when they study military science. You never leave your flank unprotected, period. Okay? Even if you have to pull troops from someplace else, you have some people protecting your two flanks. That's been known since Alexander. So,
excuse me,
I can tell you as a serious student of military science, you might even say an expert in military science, Hitler made 6 or 8 catastrophic errors in World War II, and I can go through them if you want. But then we're getting into the whole history of World War II, and I don't want to spend time on that.
I feel like we're going to be here for days if we do that. But
right. But I can tell. So here's what happened.
I just want to point out for a second, though, that this is like a fantastic example because basic purpose for Hitler and the outcome of who Hitler was is very different from if I was very high on basic purpose, but didn't have the rest of the qualities. It just shows how you could be the same on a certain scale. Am I understanding that correctly?
What do you mean by be the same on a certain scale?
Like if somebody has a very strong basic purpose, I mean, positive or negative, that's probably very important to clarify with somebody like Hitler. But you could be the same as somebody who's very different than you on a different scale. Am I explaining that correctly?
Yes.
Like I can have the same ranking as Hitler on one scale is what I'm getting at, but I'm right. Very, very different.
You probably do.
Probably.
So, yeah, here's the point. So I looked at these things he did as a student of military science. I said, why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense. And that happened over and over and over. And I could go into chapter and verse and give you details about that. But then I realized, he's destructive. He wasn't only destructive to the Allies, he was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to Germany. He was destructive to his own family. He was destructive to his own officers. You know, if you looked at him the wrong way, he had you shot. Okay? So then I understood perfectly why he did those crazy things. Because he was destructive. You know, Hermann Goering, his second in command, said, the Russians get into the war, we will lose. Hitler had a non-aggression pact signed with the Russians, but he attacked them. That's crazy. You know why he did that? Because he's destructive. Because it was the Russians, just as predicted by Hermann Goering. The Russians lost 20 million people, but they wiped out the Germans eventually.
Pardon, is destructive a scale?
No, it's a level on this scale.
It's a level on. So destructive, just so that I can solidify this point for myself, is a level on one scale. You wouldn't see that word elsewhere, right?
Actually, that does come up on a couple of other scales.
Okay, so there can be commonalities. It's just not the definition of every.
Yeah, it's destructive, but it's in a different way.
Perfect. That helps clarify that a lot.
Right.
But we can go back to the Hitler example there. I'm actually quite fascinated on how you could. I'm really starting to understand this now. I'm getting quite curious about it. By understanding how you could be similar. So let's use the basics example that I just made. Not great for it. Doesn't sound great, but let's say that I am the same as Hitler on one scale. Okay, That's it. And I'm the same number, same level as him on one scale. How are we different on how are we different on the other ones is where you can really start to map out how somebody's different and then also what level they're at and how I might not be the same. That's really interesting to me.
If you wish, if you get this book and study it, you could find your level on every scale. It's not hard to do. You know yourself. And as I was saying before, the material is precise, specific, and accurate. So it's very well defined. In other words, you're going down the scale. So, oh, this is how I am, just like he says here. And the same thing with other people. Like, what happens with this very often is, let's say a guy's reading the book, right? And he's reading the scale of choice. And he's not thinking about his mother at all. He's just not thinking about that. He's just reading the book, right? And all of a sudden he gets down to level choice. Wait a minute. This is my mother. This is exactly how she is. Now, look, I don't know this guy's mother. I probably don't even know the guy, right? There's people all over the world reading this book that I'm never going to know. But this is a philosophical science. This is precise. So when you read it, it defines the person. Ah, I see. So let's go back, as you asked me about this scale of basic purposes. Level 6 is what I call the criminal. The criminal, his purpose is pleasure. He wants whatever he considers pleasure. Haute cuisine, cocaine, Cristal champagne, custom-made suits, yachts, women. Whatever he thinks of as pleasure, that is what he wants. That's what motivates him.
Oh, I think I misunderstood that scale, by the way. So that was probably pretty funny to listen to, but it led to a good understanding. I thought that was a basic purpose in life, like a strong positive purpose in life would be a very good thing. It sounds that it's more destructive on the way up for that one.
Well, too, the purpose of the criminal is not to destroy. The purpose of the criminal is pleasure. That's what he wants. That is objective. Now, if you get in his way, will he have you killed? Yes. I don't know if you know this, in the old mafia, they did not like to kill people. They only did it when there was a compelling reason, which is why you had to get permission. Okay? Because they know it causes a lot of trouble. Somebody's got to really be a problem. So they say, okay, this guy's a nutcase. He's got to go. And they'd have him killed. If you get a guy in the mafia who's at level 7, they don't want that. That guy's destructive. They want him out. Well, in the mafia, you only go out feet first.
Sorry, I thought that the top levels were good, and then the lower you get on the scale, it's worse. Some of them are flipped, or it's just like the intensity?
First of all, I do not use the word good or bad. There is the top of the scale and there is the bottom of the scale. So the criminal is not as bad as the subversive. The subversive destroys just to destroy. The criminal doesn't do that. So most people in organized crime are at level 6. Okay? I was in a parking lot late one night in what turned out to be a mafia club, because I don't know if you know this, but in New York, the mafia used to control all the nightclubs. So a guy pulls out a .45, put it right in my face. I hadn't done anything. I didn't even know what was going on. And I said, okay, I got in my car and drove away. He didn't particularly want to kill me. I guess he was afraid I knew something, or I was going to ask something, or I was going to cause some problem, which I wasn't. You see, he didn't particularly want to kill me. He just put the gun in my face, and I went away. See? That's the way they do things. So that's the criminal.
But how do you know you should be pushing somebody up on the scale? Is that not always the case, or is there different directions on the scale?
Well, no sane person would ever want to push anybody down on any scale.
Yeah.
That's what evil people
criminal's high on the scale?
He's at level 6, which is 1 up from the bottom.
Oh, so the numbers are inverted.
Right.
Okay, see, I was there. I'm sorry, I wasted a little bit of your time there. Just I should have asked that right off the start.
Right. As I told you, I was starting at the bottom of the scale.
It does make sense. It makes logical sense. Intensity.
So then you go up to level 5. Level 5 is what I call the loser. A loser is not somebody who's doing badly. Anybody can do badly. A loser is somebody who wants to make himself suffer. This is the type of guy, one way or another, he's going to make himself suffer by drugs, by alcohol, by overeating, by crazy sex, by bad relationships. He's going to make himself suffer. Now, this is the type of person, the criminal and the subversive have no conscience. What we would call a conscience, they have no conscience. They have there's nothing in their mind about, well, yeah, I shouldn't do this because it's not nice. They don't have that. The person at level 5 has a conscience. And in some sick way, he's going to make himself suffer. He has some idea that he's been bad. He wasn't a good son, he wasn't a good parent, or whatever it was, and he will make himself suffer. And there's nothing you can do to stop that, unless you can move him up to level 4, which is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the loser. I'm sure you've known some of these people. This is the type of guy, if you give him $50,000 because she's in economic trouble, instead of using it for his house payment, his car payment, he'll blow it in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get him to stop using drugs and he takes up smoking and he winds up dying of lung cancer. He's going to make himself suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you find anybody at one of these levels, run for your life, because nothing good is going to come of it. Above that, at level 4, is what
you can't move. You can't change on the scale.
It's not a matter of can't. It's a question of, are they willing to, and are you able to?
Yeah, what they're working against, and if that's a challenge that's for you or somebody who's professionally there to help.
Right. I don't know if you know this, but in the mental health profession, it is a long time established fact that psychopaths and sociopaths do not make progress in therapy. Doesn't matter how good the therapist is. They do not make progress. Narcissists make progress, but very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I'm going into another field here. I'm just pointing out some people can't be helped. So the social worker
or it would take a very, very long time to where the science would just be very difficult to get on that.
Right. But usually what happens is the social worker comes along and sees this woman. She's a drug addict. She's a single mom. She lives in poverty. And the social worker tries to help her and is frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if she could get her off drugs, the woman would take up alcohol.
Mm-hmm. But using a framework like this book could definitely help to try. At least they can identify the different areas.
Yes, and not waste your time on these people.
Oh, I mean, as a social worker, your job is to help. But somebody who doesn't need to help, this book would be fantastic for them to know what to avoid.
This book would be fantastic for anyone to know what to avoid. So let's go up to level 4, because you asked me about this scale. Level 4 is the normal. This is the largest demographic group. Most normals in the United States are, as adults, are people who, they have a house payment, they have a car payment, they have a spouse, they have a job, they take a vacation. They're normal people. Now, the goal of the normal is conformity. Now, you might say, well, that's not a good thing. Well, but think of it this way. The normal does not want to make waves. The normal is not wading in to make some big stink over something. They just want to go to their job, put some money in the bank, take the kid to soccer, normal person. They're not out to get anybody, and they're not going to really help anybody except whoever's very close to them. That's the normal. Up from the normal at level 3 is what I call the winner. The winner wants wealth. Now, wealth doesn't just mean money. It could mean a lot of things.
Great point.
If you are an actor, an Oscar is wealth. You work for 30 years, you get this Oscar, you put it on your mantle, and it's there for the rest of your life. That's wealth.
Yeah, what's an asset and revenue to you? That can take many definitions.
Right. Or if you're a baseball player, every baseball player wants to have a World Series ring. Most of them never get it. When you get that ring, you put it on, and you've got it for life. See, that's wealth. That's more important to a guy than $50,000. It's what he's been fighting for since he was 5 years old.
Yeah, for him and also for his career as well.
Right.
Yep.
That's the winner. So the winner wants to win.
The winner is not the last level?
What? We didn't
the winner is not. I know, that's what I mean. I was saying that out of curiosity. The winner's not.
We're at level 3. We're level 3.
That's interesting to me.
Now, I'll give you an example. I know somebody who was a winner. And just a friend, and sometimes we would play board games, like Monopoly.
Yeah.
So, it's just a game. Doesn't mean anything. It's Monopoly money, right? It's something you do with your friends to kill time and have fun, right? Tell jokes, right? If this guy were to land on your property that had a hotel on it, and have to give you, let's say, $2,000, he would get really upset. Totally out of proportion to what you would expect. You know why? He wants to win. So there are lots of people who do things who don't care if they win or not. Like a softball game, right? You get together with all your friends and have a softball game. Nobody gives a damn who wins or loses. The point is you're having fun. You're playing softball. You got a hit. You stole second, whatever it is. You get to the end of the game. Oh, who won? Oh, these guys won. Oh, is that right? Okay. See, you don't care. That's normal.
Yeah, it shows how we're at different levels. I mean, I find that super interesting. I love competing at all times.
Not a question of competing. It's a question of winning.
Okay, that could be how that's different.
I was on the football team, okay? And I was very quick. And we had a guy who was a halfback. This guy could run like the wind. So we're in the gym one day, and he says, "Give me the ball and let me see if I can get by you." I said, "Okay." So I gave him the ball. He got by me. I didn't care. I just said, "Yeah, this guy is a lot quicker than I am." It's like, I didn't have to win. It was fun. It was, all my friends were there. I didn't have to win. That it was just something we did. Okay, let's try it out, see what happens. You want to arm wrestle? Okay, let's arm wrestle. Oh, you beat me. Okay. See? You don't really care if you win. It's just, yeah. So
what's level 2? I'm dying to know what's next.
Level 2 is the leader. Okay. The leader is down for the struggle. The leader, his goal is to conquer. That's very different from winning. And I'll give you an example. Thomas Jefferson was at level 3. He was a winner. When the English, during the Revolutionary War, eventually got far enough inland to get to Monticello, where he lived, he fled. They told him they're coming. He got on his horse and he got the hell away from there. He never fought anybody. He was not a leader. He was a winner. Look at his life. Boy, did he win. He won. He was an architect. He was a musician. He was an inventor. He was a lawyer. He was a writer. He was president of the United States. He founded University of Virginia. I mean, this is a guy who won and won and won. And see, you're going to have a hard time finding anything that he lost in his life. Now, it is true that his wife, who he loved dearly, died, because in those days, that's what happened. People would get yellow fever or something. They would die, and he was upset by that. But that's not something he did. You see what I'm saying? He won because he got this wonderful woman who he loved dearly to marry him. So the fact that she died and he was bereft, well, okay, that's what happens. If you fall in love with somebody and they die, you're not happy about it, right? Doesn't mean he lost. It's just something that happened.
Mm.
Okay, so most leaders have difficult lives. Most. Look at Abe Lincoln. Abe Lincoln was a leader. He saved the Union, he freed the slaves, and he got shot in the back of the head by a political enemy. Alexander Hamilton was a leader. Okay, he was a colonel when he was 22.
Mm-hmm.
He was so brilliant that Washington kept him at his elbow, kept Hamilton at Washington's elbow through the whole war for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Hamilton kept saying to him, "Give me a command. I want to fight." Washington said, "No, I need you." Washington could see that Hamilton was a lot smarter than Washington was. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened to Hamilton? He eventually was murdered by a political opponent. So people who are leaders, another one is Martin Luther King. Look what happened to him. He was a real leader. See? It wasn't about winning for him. It was about leading. It's a different thing. Up from that at level 1 is the saint. The saint's purpose is transcendence. Now, how the person articulates that depends on his faith, his religion. So if you talk to a Christian who's at level 1, he'll say he wants to go to heaven and become an angel. If you talk to a Buddhist who's at level 1, he'll say he wants to attain nirvana. See, they're both transcending. The transcendence is going beyond.
Doing everything you can instead of checking the boxes, essentially. It's
transcendent people are not interested in the things that the rest of us are interested in. They don't want money. They don't want fame. They don't want fancy clothes. They want to transcend. So these are the people who do a lot of meditation or something like that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example,
they're in their process or doing their thing. It's less external. They're trying to meet the best of what they could find.
They're trying to transcend.
Yeah.
A good example of this is Jesus of Nazareth, Gautama Siddhartha, who founded Buddhism, Paramahansa Yogananda.
Some people might make a negative association to this because it's saying you are like Jesus, which is sometimes in the psychological context not seen as a great thing. But I understand what this means in terms of like where nothing's fitting the catalog and you're trying to like, you're not even trying to meet a benchmark, you know, you're just trying to find who knows what.
Transcendence.
Yeah.
Okay. The person has an idea what that means. There are many people now who are intensely spiritual, but not religious. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand that. And I would even say some people are not even, wouldn't even say they're spiritual. Some people might just define it like that. I've also seen that in myself.
All transcendent persons, meaning people at level 1, are spiritually oriented. So these people have some idea of where they're transcending to. Okay? And they might articulate it in different ways. But a perfect example, a famous example, is St. Francis of Assisi. Francis's father was a rich merchant, and he expected Francis to take over the business when he grew up and be another rich merchant. Francis did not want that. Francis founded the Franciscan order. He was transcendent. So it is known that he performed miracles. So that's a good example of, the father did not understand. I built up this business. I'm giving it to you. You can have an easy life. You can be a rich man, have whatever you, not what he wanted. So those are the 7 loves.
Wow. So much so that you can't even find what to give them. That's quite the level.
You mean level 1?
Yeah. I was actually quite surprised by that. I thought that, I feel like leader would be where people would stop there, but well.
No. No. I mean, look, if you study Jesus, Yogananda, even Gandhi, okay, they were transcendent persons. That was their goal. There was nothing in this plane of existence that wanted them. They wanted to attain some high level of spirituality beyond this world. That's what transcend means.
It's very motivating as well. You could be completely misunderstood and doing something that doesn't have results, but you're level 1.
Right. So, as you just pointed out, a person can be successful or unsuccessful at any one of these levels. So you have to realize there's 35 scales. Each has 7 levels. There's 245 different levels. A person can fail or succeed at any one of those 245.
That's an incredible amount of factors to consider on a person. When you were working with clients, literally wrapping up to the start of our conversation here, this tied in perfectly, by the way. All these factors, are you getting people to fill out questionnaires? This is a lot of questions to fill out.
Nope. Never had anybody fill out a questionnaire.
They're not doing the assessment on themselves because it's more accurate?
First of all, there are many people now who have this book. I call them septemicists, and they're using it to find themselves, to find their spouse. They're using the book the way it was intended to be used.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to something that I was not able to finish earlier, which is that once you know the correct level, you can improve that person by moving them up one level at a time. Mm-hmm. This is big, and I'll tell you why. I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And I'll tell you what.
The gradient problem?
Right.
Could you explain that really quickly?
Sure. We all have problems, difficulties, dilemmas, situations that we can't resolve. More than 99% of the time, it's because the person does not know the gradient. The reason you hire an expert is to teach you the gradient.
So what is the gradient?
It depends on what it is. So, for example, a good algebra teacher, he's been teaching algebra for 20 years. He knows the gradients. He knows it on that first day. He needs to explain to them, we have a thing called a variable. The kids say, what's that? He says, we have some value. We're going to call it X. And we don't know what that value is, but we can find out through algebra. Oh,
yeah. So, by the way, sorry, audience. I probably just don't know the definition of the word gradient here, so I'm limited here.
Right. So, I've worked as a trainer of people. Some guy comes and says, "I'm 50 pounds of weight. Can you train me?" I said, "Sure." I'm not going to just give this guy a 100-pound dumbbell or tell him to go run 5 miles. That's malpractice. Mm-hmm. I have to find the gradient for this guy. So I talk to him, I look at him, and I guess. I say, all right, let me see what you can do with a 15 pounds, right? So I give him a 15-pound dumbbell. And I say, let me see how many of these you can do, right? So he's doing the curls. So I say to him, how is this going? He says, I can do this all day. Stop. Let's try 20.
Is gradient the same word they use for like the steepness of a hill?
Yes.
Okay, now I understand. Okay, so it was the definition. I am lacking vocabulary.
Right. So now I give the guy 20 pounds, right? I say, let's see you do this, right? So I say, how's this going? He gets to like 8, 9. He says, this is, I'm starting to get a little bit tired here. Maybe I can do 12 of these. Maybe. Stop. And I would say to him, I want you to do 12 reps, 3 times a day on each arm. And at the end of the week, we will talk again. So I see him a week later and I say, how are you doing with your curls? If he says to me, this is tough, I'm sore, I say, fine, just keep doing it. If he says, this has gotten quite easy, I can do 25 of these now. Fine, stop. Let's go to 25 pounds. See,
this is a very interesting point. You might not like this, but just applying strategy, because you're the author here. So I'm thinking about strategy of how to use this now. Like while you're explaining this, I might kick somebody back a level and say, go do that instead. And this sounds terrible in like the worst case example, but in the dumbbell, go lift a lighter weight.
That's right.
In the example of a criminal, go be a criminal if you want. There's no way they're going to do it. If they do, then that's probably not fantastic of an example, but it does show there is a point in that I just thought of this, and it might be a good way to get through to somebody who keeps on doing the wrong thing. Is just go do that worst thing that you keep on wanting to do, and maybe they're just going to be like, okay, actually, I don't want to do that. I don't know. I'm just explaining here that this framework has helped me see a strategy and an approach to dealing with somebody, which is quite interesting. I have a question really quick, because I'm not saying this sounds like Myers-Briggs tests or anything like that, but those are all I'm trying to get at here is that there's a certain number of factors with tests like that, and the way it's structured is different. And then there's questions and inventories that are asked on these. Have you ever been opposed? This sounds like quite a lengthy inventory, and the problem I have with those ones is that they're not in depth enough. This sounds like a framework that could have a website, like you would find, or like a website or a tool or an inventory that could get created by professionals. Have you ever had somebody approach you about that, or have you done that?
No. And if they do, I will say no.
Really? That's what I was trying to get at. I was trying to wonder if it would apply
for a reason. When you look at this table, you get it. It's like looking at the periodic table of elements. Can you recall when you were maybe 12 or 13 or 14, you first saw the periodic table of elements? Can you recall that? I'm sure at some point you did. And when you first looked at it, you said, what's this big thing on the wall? Right? But the more you look at it, the more sense it makes. And after a while, you say, oh, I see. Helium is 1. Hydrogen is 1. Helium is 2. Lithium is 3. And it just goes down horizontally and vertically.
I'm less science and more math, but a graph, understanding the technicalities of graph. I can look at the shape of a graph, 3D anything at this point, and completely understand the behavior or something. So I can get the example if it's the same.
Right. So the reason I want to mention this is
conceptual. It's important to have the conceptuality of that tool and be able to look at it as an overview instead of having it broken down into questions.
When you look at the table, if you're not mentally, you get it. Okay, you get it. You look at it. First blush, you never saw this before. You open it up and you say, oh, this makes sense. You know why they say that? It's natural law.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Pythagorean theorem. When you learn the Pythagorean theorem, you may be, 12 years old or 13. You look at it the first day, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Or c equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. However you want to express it, it's the same thing. And it doesn't take long to get it.
So without an inventory, how would a professional use this in their practice if they wanted to go?
The first thing is, if you have a client, find out where the client is on these scales. And that is not hard to do because they tell you the level.
The professional is doing it on the client, never the client doing it and then them reading it.
Well, never tell anyone the level of anyone on any scale. It's counterproductive and unethical. Give the person the book. Say to him, let's say the guy's having trouble with his relationships. Open the book to the scale of relationships. He'll look at it and he'll say, you mean there's a scale of relationships? You say, yeah. This relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on the scale? I guarantee he's going to want to know that because he's having trouble with this.
So the professional should be looking at that to understand? what the suggestion should be, and then the professional can also show the scale to the client so they can make their own progress on that level.
Never make a suggestion. Just give them the scale. It's very clear.
That's actually exactly what I was trying to say, but yeah.
So he looks at the scale, right? And here's what's going to happen. In a matter of seconds, like 20, 25 seconds, he will find a bracket. He'll say something like, I can see right away that our relationship is definitely not at level 1, 2, or 3, because that's a scale we're training. Yeah. See? And he said, well, good, you got it down to 4 choices. Go ahead and read the text and you can get it. He reads it, he comes back, he knows the relationship. He's going to say, oh, I can see we're at level 5. That's not so great. That's near the bottom. That explains X, Y, and Z. See, he's having an insight.
Because it is a bold. I mean, the reason I'm asking this now is because it is a very bold claim to say that you have something that is this solid, but what I'm not to be offensive, but it is something that should be put out there, and it's a compliment, if anything, that it is a very bold claim. But the levels that you described on a single scale is very impressive to be able to do an analysis. And I was just looking at that and thinking, right now, I just want to have the book in front of me so I can look at number 1 for each one. I just want to make myself aware of that, because humans, as you said, show the book. So I'm really much understanding that. I was asking about the inventory for like a corporate setting, but that could actually be the problem with those, is that people aren't just aiming for the best. Looking at each scale and looking at number 1, even in the morning on the bookshelf. I feel like that would be of tremendous value to me.
That's the wrong way to use it.
Really? I feel like I would still do that, though.
And target yourself for the next level up. If you are at level 4 and you make a serious attempt to get to level 3, you will get there. You know why? It's the next level up.
Oh, so it is the right way to do it. The wrong way to do it is an inventory, the corporate thing that we were talking about. Is that what you're saying?
Find out what level you are at or the other person is at. Let's say you have some employee who's giving you a hard time. Where is he on the scale of basic purposes? Where is he on the scale of personal influence? Where is he on the scale of choice? If you spot that guy on all 35 scales, you will understand him better than he understands himself, because these are factual levels. It's not an approximation, and it's not an opinion. It's like Newton's 3 laws of motion, We're still using them.
If anybody is bent on arguing that fact, a simple relative analysis makes that claim not even necessary, by the way. But it is very true. I mean, you're saying it, and that's what we're going to go off of. But I'm just making the claim that you wouldn't even actually need it to be fundamentally there. It's a relative scale of this clarity. Who am I relative to that guy? And what progress is he making since the last time I met him? That's already of tremendous value. But the fact that this is grounded in what you're saying, I don't understand science to that level. I understand math and other areas. I know math is probably considered a science, but this is where I get a little dumb. But yeah, what I'm saying is fundamentally, I can't be the person to say yes or no. I'm not the professional. I'm not you. But anybody can see how this is of value just by, you might agree with it or disagree with it, but my use case is a general user. I'm not a practitioner. I'm not anything. I just want to open that book up and look at level 1 on each one and aim for the best.
Get the book. It's available hardbound, softbound, and ebook. Get it. Look at it. It will blow your mind. And
hardcover, softcover, and Amazon, right? Can people get this on audio?
Hardcover, softcover, and ebook.
Is it available by audio at all?
No, it will never be available by audio because you have to look at the table.
That almost sounds like I was testing you there. I agree with that. Good decision. I actually don't like listening to things by audio, and that's perfect. So that's fantastic. I'm actually gonna take a look at this book, I believe. This is quite interesting. I think this is going to bug me a little bit to know what level 1 is on each of these scales. You explained that very interesting. That just, I love how we went to on the single scale. I didn't know that I didn't know that it would be so perfectly in depth there, but really focusing on the 1 and then seeing the progression really made me understand how all of them could work. But now I need to know what the levels are on each.
Okay. Well, I have to go.
But anyways, I was going to end it right there because it was perfect.
Right.
So thank you very much for joining us. One more time, let people know where they can find you.
Septemics.com.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Jim
Kevin.
Marshall, everybody. Thank you very much for coming on today. Point 5
Thanks,
Podcast.
Kevin. Be in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye.